The Giants obviously thought this season starts next weekend. One big name coach may have cost his team the game, and the game of the weekend had all sorts of MVP level swag, all that and more, because it's time for Sunday Night Blitz. Welcome to Sunday Night Blitz, taping live from the Yahoo Sportsbook at the Venetian Resort in Las Vegas. Frank Schwab, Jason Fitz, we got a lot to get. We'll get into Vegas and the experience we're having. We will get into that, I promise you. But we start, Frank, because we are both shooketh right now with the biggest result of the night, Sunday Night Football. We all thought it was going to be the biggest game, and instead it turned out to be the biggest ass whooping I've seen in a long time to start a season. What went wrong?
First of all, you're a Giants fan. Coming off playoffs, all excited all off season, buy your tickets at a game. It's raining, but whatever. I'm at the Giants game. We're going to beat the Cowboys. And then you watch that happen. You've been waiting for this game for 8 months, whatever it is. And you watch your team get run out of the building. Unbelievable how bad they were. I'm still trying to figure out, was this the Giants announcing they're terrible, or was this the Cowboys announcing, hey, we are serious about a Super Bowl push this year? Where do you stand on that? I don't know where I'm at right now, because unbelievable how mismatched that was.
So I've got a group text with some buddies, right? And we're all massive fans of different teams, like everybody has. And one of my friends, Devin, biggest Giants fan I know. And Devin all year has been talking the talk, put bets out with everybody. Hey, the Giants are going to the playoffs all year. You see the excitement. Daniel Jones was legit. The contract is team friendly. We've been hearing this all year. What we learned today is that the only legit thing on that field, really above and beyond everything else, was the Cowboys' defensive line. Like, I don't even know what we saw from Daniel Jones, because all I saw was him getting buried into the ground over and over again. Like, I came in with this expectation on Fantasy Football Live. I picked Saquon. I thought Saquon would at least get me something. Nope. Like, you're looking across the board, and what I'm seeing is a Giants offense that just wasn't ready for Micah Parsons and that entirety of the pass rush. Like, that was just an absolute front seven butt whooping.
Yep, absolutely. And we were talking, before we started taping, is Micah Parsons better this year? How is that even possible? But he looked every single play he was in Daniel Jones' lap. It was unbelievable. I really do think that this was the Cowboys show tonight. Like, this is the Cowboys saying, hey, Eagles, don't sleep on us. We're coming, to borrow Dion's phrase, right? And now I came into the season not thinking they were a Super Bowl contender, right? I kept saying, I think this team wins double-digit games. I think that there's a lot of talent, but there's something just missing to get them over the hump. I'm starting to reconsider that a little bit now. I still, we got to see it week 2. We don't overreact to anything. Right? But I think this Cowboys team, maybe they are legit. Maybe the Eagles do have something to worry about. We'll talk about the Eagles later. They didn't look, if you're telling me just based on 3 hours of football in week 1, man, the Cowboys look like they are going to be a thorn in the Eagles' side all year long in that NFC East.
Over the course of the show, we're going to react to every single game. We will get to literally every game. And rain was a factor in many of these games. Weather was a factor all across the board. But I love what you said about the Eagles, because, frankly, we look at so much of the NFL and the way we've been predicting. We've spent months rolling the same predictions over and over and over again, right? But
some of them I was definitely wrong on already, and I'm going to take some L's, right?
I know it's too early in the season. Say definitely. No, but I do look at the power rankings, if you will, of the NFC. And the conversation has been, where do the Cowboys belong? And that's a difficult conversation to answer. But tonight, I think they really did make a statement. Like, we didn't see great football from the Giants. We didn't see great football from the Washington Commanders. We saw some questionable moments from the Eagles that at times looked great and at times looked like they had no idea what they were doing. The one complete team that we saw out of that division, not out of the whole conference, but out of that division, was Dallas. And then you have to look at it on top of that and say, okay, Mike McCarthy takes back play calling, as we know. Dak looked very comfortable in this game. So, I've got one side where it looked like the weather was an issue, the offensive line was an issue, everything was an issue. And I've got the other side where it looks like they're playing Madden against somebody that just picked up the sticks for the first time, right? Like, this was as thorough a butt kicking as I can remember. And what's hard for that is that last year the Giants got their butts kicked a few times by good football teams, right? So,
yeah. And we all know the Giants were lucky last year. They were. I hate to use that term because everybody gets mad about it. We weren't lucky. We were in the playoffs. We won a playoff game. You were a little lucky. It's okay. That's fine. You were over your skis a little bit in Brian Daboll's first season. Now that regression's coming, regression might go the other way on them. I mean, that offensive line looked terrible. And a lot of that was a Cowboys front. That's the thing. You only got one game sample size, so you don't know. Was it just the Cowboys front getting after them, or was it the Giants line is terrible? the Giants line looked like a problem. And Daniel Jones, he didn't have much of a chance. He also didn't play well. Their defense didn't play well. Their special teams were awful tonight. Like, everything the Giants could have done wrong tonight, they did wrong. You really wonder whether it's just Giants team is heading. That's a tough way to start the season, man. You try to regroup from that. It's a long, long week in East Rutherford.
I love this note. It's the first 2 touchdowns of this of the year were scored on defense or special teams. Obviously by the Cowboys, since the Giants scored literally nothing.
Score.
I just want to make sure
still waiting to score their first touchdown.
Yeah, I mean, they're still waiting, but that's the first time since the Vikings did it in 2016, and that speaks to part of who the Cowboys are going to be this year. Because to the point that we started, and we'll move on to other games soon, but like where we started with part of this is Mike McCarthy and that offense. We spend so much time as a society obsessed with quarterback play and obsessed with offensive highlights. I think the Cowboys also reminded you that there are 2 elite teams in the NFC, and both of those elite teams today, as of right now, I would say San Francisco and Dallas both looked elite in week 1. Let me say it that way. They both looked elite in large part because their defenses were spectacular, right? Like, that just has to be part of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And even the special teams. Look, that game started, the Giants moved downfield. It looked like, okay, the Giants got some things going. They line up for a field goal, gets blocked, scoop and score the other way. And that totally took the air out of the balloon. Like, the Giants were awful after that. So, and that's, look, I mean, if the Cowboys can put this all together, I don't know that they're in a circle of trust yet. I don't know that I'm ready, right? I'm not ready to put them in the Super Bowl quite yet, but team I saw tonight, maybe they can. That was really, really impressive. I thought nobody's going to top the 49ers for most impressive performance in week 1. And then the Cowboys played on Sunday night, and hey, they looked as good as they looked better than anybody. That was the team of today.
We will give the 49ers their flowers in a second. But before we do that, let's talk about what was the most exciting game of the day. And again, we're sitting here, we're hanging out, we're at the Venetian, right? We're at the Yahoo Sportsbook inside the Venetian. And there was a moment during the whole day where the crowd just popped. Everybody went nuts. And it happened during the game of the day, which was Miami taking on the Chargers. You and I had talked about this game a lot leading up to it. 2 teams that feel like they're really trying to stake their claim as not being second best in their divisions, but actually best in their divisions. And the most incredible thing to me that we saw out of a down to the wire, oh my God, win for the Dolphins is that we saw 2 teams in the Dolphins and the Chargers get points and yards galore and plays galore against 2 quality defenses. Like, I believe in the Dolphins defensively. I believe in the Chargers defensively. And I still watch the respective offenses just beat them up.
Yeah, and sometimes, and this goes way back to that, remember the Chiefs-Rams game and everybody's, defense is dead in the NFL. No, watch the game. These are 2 offenses that are awesome, and they're just clicking on a very high level, and that's what I felt about today's game. This was the Chargers and Dolphins at an incredibly high level on offense, and I think the key takeaway for me is, and we both know people who refuse to buy into Tua Tagovailoa. It's always something. It's always, he's not as good as Justin Herbert. Oh, he has Tyreek Hill to throw to, this and that. We have to get to a point where we can just say, in a safe space, Tua is one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL, period, hard stop. He threw for 466 today, and when they needed it, when they were down 34-30, drove them all the way downfield and threw that incredible touchdown pass to Tyreek Hill. I get Tyreek Hill's awesome. He's going to Hall of Fame someday, right? He makes every quarterback better. Tua is also good on his own. Like, Joe Burrow has Jamar Chase, and Patrick Mahomes has Travis Kelce, the greatest tight end of his generation, catching the ball.
Well, and Mahomes had Tyreek Hill.
Right? That Tyreek Hill guy too.
There was a period where Tyreek was who Mahomes leaned on, right? And we weren't sitting here saying, we don't
ding those guys,
good,
right? Yeah,
but
we don't do that to Burrow. Herbert has Keenan Allen and Mike Williams and all of them. We don't do that to the other guys, but we're always finding reasons to not give Tua his proper respect. However big that tier is of, I can lift the team on my shoulders and win a lot of games. Tua's in that tier. He is. And last year, and I kept saying this on the pod last year with Charles, every time Tua started and finished a game, the Dolphins looked like a Super Bowl contender. They were all season.
That is such an important part of this conversation because there was about midway through the season, there were little rumblings of, is Tua an MVP candidate?
Exactly. And if he would have been healthy the whole time, the answer is yes.
So now I can already hear the clickety-clack from a distance of people deciding they want to comment. And by the way, rate, review, subscribe, leave us a 5-star review and feel free to comment constantly. But I can already hear it of, but we don't know if he's going to stay healthy. I hate to be the bearer of bad news here. You have no idea if your favorite quarterback is going to be healthy on any team. And I get, as we've talked about, and we talked about the other night leading into the season after Thursday Night Football, we're used to what it looks like to recoup an ACL injury or an MCL injury or a hamstring. We know what that feels like. We have no idea what to do when you're talking about brain injuries. And that's what a concussion is. So I respectfully understand why so many people have hesitation. But at some point, what I look at is Tua met with doctors. Tua met with his family. His family sat down and they decided, are you safe playing? After they got all their medical advice, the team and the quarterback decided it was safe for him to continue playing. As he admitted on the record, and some of his family members have talked about, he considered retirement until they got all the information. They got the information. They decided to continue. That tells me that all we can do now is put faith in the fact that Tua is going to be fine. If we do that, if you eliminate the concussion portion of the conversation, which I think now fairly you have to do at this point, like that's uncontrollable. If you take that uncontrollable portion of it out, Tua showed you exactly who it is. He looks a little thicker, looks a little beefier, right? But he was throwing balls into windows that were absolutely insane. This wasn't just Tyreek Hill being Tyreek Hill. This was Tua threading the needle against good players over and over again. Like it was beautiful to watch.
I will say this though. The concussion thing, I think it's still there and it's always going to be there. Here's the question, and Dolphins have to answer this question. Do you pay Tua? Because he's going to get that Jalen Hurts, Lamar Jackson, maybe not Joe Burrow type money, but in that range, do you pay him? You almost have to, right? And just hope. Like, he is so good when he plays, and we're not giving him a credit. Everybody's been talking his whole career, they screwed up Justin Herbert. They should have taken Herbert. He completely outplayed Herbert today. Completely. He was a better quarterback on the field, period. But do you pay him? Because this concussion thing is always going to be a part of his story. I get, if you're a Dolphins, you almost have to, but it's scary.
You mentioned Justin Herbert, and I do think it's absolutely incredible game by Justin Herbert. I'm not going to take anything away.
He played well. Tua was better.
But this was a 36-34 game, and 36 is key because there was a late missed extra point, right? Could have been a field goal game. Let's remember, Justin Herbert and the Chargers got the ball with enough time left to drive down the field and try and win the game or tie the game, and didn't. Miami's defense came up big. A couple of things.
Herbert had to bet intentional grounding too.
Right. It's just a reminder that pass rush wins right now. Like 2 games in a row, we're talking about key moments from pass rush. But also, I think you have to look at this and say, the Chargers need to figure out how to win these types of games. They had some issues over the last few years against elite opponents not getting these wins. If I'm a Chargers fan right now, I'm frustrated because that was a hell of a game, hell of an offensive day for them, and they got cooked just enough that they lost that game.
Do you think, let's talk betting for a while since we're at the beautiful Yahoo Sportsbook at the Venetian Resort Las Vegas? Yeah, you did. Yeah, you did. Yeah. Would you trust the Dolphins as a Super Bowl bet? The Dolphins were underdogs today, by the way. +3 came out and got the straight up win. Because I've been thinking about this Dolphins team of like, what team down the odds a little bit if they hit every green light, Tua stays healthy, Tyreek stays healthy. What team could come up and rise up like the Eagles almost did last year? Dolphins are definitely on that list, right? Like they're a Super Bowl contender.
I mean, that's why, as much as people keep telling me it's a hot take, the reason I think the Jets are going to finish in 3rd in their own division isn't because I'm anti-Aaron Rodgers or anti the Jets. They're great, awesome, spectacular. I am very pro Buffalo and I'm very pro Miami right now. So
how can you not be? And I'm pro Jets too. Like I like all 3. I legitimately like all 3 teams, but the math is going to add up to some point where some teams are going to miss the playoffs in the AFC. But this Miami team, again, in games at Tua since the beginning of last year, new coach, new Tyreek, all this, games at Tua started and finished, they have been elite. They have been one of the best teams in the NFL, but we haven't looked at them that way because we refuse to give Tua his flowers.
I should say here, too, the stat line on Tua, 28 of 45 for 466. He averaged 10.4 yards per attempt. That's a big number compared to some of the numbers.
And that's about 20 per completion, right? Like, unbelievable.
That's much bigger than a lot of numbers we're going to see. 3 touchdowns, 1 pick on a game where the only running back that got any real work was Raheem Mostert. We all know that. 10 carries, 37 yards. Like, they weren't running the ball particularly efficiently. They were comfortable just putting the ball into his hands over and over and over again. So, huge game by Tyreek Hill. Huge game by Tua. Huge win, I think.
Yeah, and one thing before I move on, one thing I love about Mike McDaniel is he's not one of these guys that tries to get too smart. He's like, you know what? That Tyreek Hill guy, nobody can cover him. We're going to target him 20 times. We don't care. It's like almost the NBA. We're just going to isolate the best guy over and over. Mike McDaniel knows, I got Tyreek Hill and you don't. I'm going to get him the ball as much as possible. I love that about him and his coaching approach.
So from beautiful, dynamic, amazing offense that's fun to watch that you just want more and more of in your life to the exact opposite of that. The Steelers, they go in. The San Francisco versus Pittsburgh, this was supposed to be one of the biggest games of the week. You and I were really interested in it. Several times this week on different interviews, I said it was the game I was looking forward to the most because of what I thought we would learn about San Francisco in the process and Brock Purdy. We learned something there. But San Francisco went in and they just shellacked the Steelers, right? And the most stunning part about it to me was I was watching the Steelers team that in the preseason, Kenny Pickett looked great. And then we get to this game and it was painful to watch.
Remind me next August to not pay any attention to what I see in preseason, right? I guess when we get to the Packers, maybe that preseason showed up a little bit today. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of clips out there, audio, video, whatever you want of me saying 49ers might not be that good. What about the downside of the 49ers? Oh my God, the Steelers are going to upset them week 1. You don't even need the point. Yeah, within 5 minutes. It was one of those games where, I bet the Steelers, being at the beautiful Yahoo Sportsbook here at the Venetian.
I like that plug. That's good.
Yeah, it's good. I'm a company guy.
We were at the
company guy.
Okay, yeah.
My Twitter handle's Yahoo Schwab. I'm a company man here.
I do appreciate that about you.
I knew 5 minutes into that game, I don't need to worry about this anymore. I lost this bet. I mean, it was just unbelievable how those two teams looked. I don't think the Steelers are bad. I just think the 49ers maybe are that good. And I was the skeptic of Brock Purdy, saying over and over, it's just 5 games. Let's slow down. Let's see how he looks, the elbow surgery and all that. He looked much better. Like he's not a one-year wonder, I don't think. Not playing like that. The Steelers have a good defense. They're a good defense. Whenever TJ Watt's on the field, they have a good defense. He shredded them. He could have, if Kyle Shanahan had something personal against Mike Tomlin, they could have hung 50 on them if they wanted. He did. They took the foot completely off the gas in the second half because why? The game was over. But Purdy looked great. Ayuk looked great. I mean, there's going to be games where it's the Deebo Samuel game and he scores twice, or the George Kittle game where he scores 3 times. They have so many weapons. McCaffrey was awesome again. But Purdy is the guy who I was skeptical about, and I'm already taking that L. He's here. Like, he's a legit dude. If you would have told me, look, one of these quarterbacks got drafted 20th, one of them got drafted 262nd in the same draft, I would have said, yeah, Kenny Pickett's really trying to just stay on in the league as a 7th-round pick. Oh, wait, no. He was the first-round pick because he didn't look it on Sunday.
Brock Purdy looked in control. He looked smart. He looked like...
He had a few athletic plays, too, that you forget is a big part of his game, really.
He looked decisive, which I think was important to this. Brandon Ayuk, everybody that had Brandon Ayuk now is in their fantasy football group thread talking their talk. Yeah, like, show me the receipts for
Matt Harmon's taking some victory laps,
my
man.
God,
I'll tell you that.
That's inevitable. But, I mean, you mentioned 8 catches for 129 yards, 2 touchdowns for Ayuk, and uncoverable. Brock Purdy goes off in this game. Kenny Pickett, and this is what's alarming to me. Now, 30-7 in a game that didn't feel that close. It was 20-7 at the half, though. So the game was still somewhat in reach. This is what I cannot make sense because I think Pittsburgh's an incredibly well-coached team. 31 of 46 for Kenny Pickett. They ran the ball a total of 10 times. Pickett was one of them. A total of 10. How do you have Najee Harris and run the ball 6? He ran the ball 6 times. Jaylen Warren picks up 3 carries. So non-quarterback rushes, 9 of them. 9? Like, that just, if you are getting your butt kicked and you can't get any offense going, at least just try and establish the run. I was stunned, and I think this is a lot about how good San Francisco's defense is, but I didn't feel like the Steelers came out with any sense of identity at all, and that was shocking.
And maybe they fell in love with the Kenny Pickett preseason stuff, right? Like, oh, we got something here. Well, maybe you don't. Kenny Pickett had 9 yards before their final drive of the first half. Like, he was getting nothing done. His stats looked okay at the end, but he wasn't that good. We saw that. At one point in this game, the yardage was 157 for the 49ers, -3 for the Steelers. It was just unbelievable to see. Again, I have respect for the Steelers. I don't think the Steelers are a bad team because of today. It was unbelievable to see a good team get dominated like that. And again, it says everything about the 49ers, probably something about the Steelers too. We'll find out. Look, that 49ers defense is nasty. Like, they're going to do this to a lot of quarterbacks, and even better than Kenny Pickett. We'll see how Pickett rebounds, though. It's a big question for Pittsburgh.
I'm not going to freak out about the Steelers, but I will say this. For a lot of the teams, we talk all the time about how it takes a month before you really hit your stride. Hear it all the time. Fine. the Steelers had a stride in the preseason, right? Yeah. They had a stride. So this isn't we looked clunky, we still look clunky. This was we looked good, now we look clunky. I think this puts a ton of pressure on the Steelers going into week 2. Puts a ton of pressure on Pickett. It puts a ton of pressure on Freiermuth. Puts a ton of pressure on the coaching staff. Like, you have weapons. There is
Deontay left this game with a hamstring. Like, they're one of those teams limping out of week 1, literally and figuratively, I guess. Because you're right, a lot of pressure on him in week 2. Like, of all the teams that lost, the Giants and the Steelers are 2. I think they're pretty good. Well, are you? Let's figure it out next week, because this can't happen again.
Now, that's 2 playoff caliber teams we thought coming into the season that lost today. I don't think there's a more shocking playoff caliber team that just got their butts kicked, frankly, than watching what happened to the Bengals. And this isn't about Cleveland goes and just absolutely destroys Cincinnati. It's that Cincinnati's offense, which has been their calling card forever, wasn't there. It's Joe Burrow and he didn't play any preseason. He was gone. We know that the injury was a big part of this, but Joe Burrow was wearing a glove in the rain. The ball was slipping around. They just couldn't get anything going. And they got beat pretty handily by a Cleveland team that, if you just look at the box score, you see 24-3 is the final score. I cannot say this loud enough. I don't think Deshaun Watson was all that great in this game, and they still won 24-3.
Yeah, we're sitting next to each other in the Yahoo Sports book.
Oh, yeah.
And
you don't mention.
Hey, why not? And we're over and over saying at the Venetian Resort Las Vegas, and over, either me or you are saying, did you see Watson miss that pass? Did you see how late he was on that pass? Did you see how inaccurate he was on that pass? Deshaun Watson didn't play well today. I didn't think his numbers looked okay, but if you watch the game, there's still a lot of question marks about Deshaun Watson going forward. But if he has this defense, look, we didn't talk enough in the offseason about that Jim Schwartz hire. Jim Schwartz is a very, very good defensive coordinator. May not be a great head coach, whatever, but you give him the keys to the defense and he's going to create havoc. He is going to have a lot of different looks up front. They're going to get pressure with Foro, blitz selectively, and do very well when they do. And you're going to play a lot of man coverage behind it. And that just locked up Cincy's offense. This is a good offense. It's a great offense. We're not used to seeing the Bengals look like this. We see him Burrow throwing. Here's Chase. Here's Higgins. Higgins had 8 targets today and had no catches. Imagine it playing him and Drake London in your fantasy team, and you get a donut out of both of them, right? It was just shocking to see Cincinnati that bad on offense. They had to go for it late in the game. I believe it was 16-zip at that point. It's a 4th and 4. They go for it. Burrow gets a snap, and Myles Garrett's in his lap right away getting the sack. This Browns defense, if this is the Browns defense going forward, and why wouldn't it be? Cincy's got a good offense. We both know that. That puts the Browns in a different level. Even if Deshaun Watson is just a guy going forward, still have Nick Chubb, still have a lot of talent around him. If this defense is this good, there's a big statement in the AFC North, I thought, today.
If I told you this morning at 9:45 in the morning Pacific time before the game's kicked off that Joe Mixon would be the second leading receiver for the Bengals in this game, that Irv Smith would be tied for the second leading receiver. You mentioned the numbers, but Tyler Boyd gets 2 catches for 10 yards. T. Higgins gets no catches. Combined, they had 11 targets. So combined, they had 11 targets to get 2 catches. It's just not good enough.
Yeah. And even Jamar Chase was a non-factor.
9 targets, 5 catches. There's nothing here. But here's one key difference, and I'll go back to just patience and play calling. One key difference between these 2 teams. Nick Chubb, 18 carries for 106 yards. Jerome Ford, 15 carries, only 36 yards. But Cleveland obviously realized, hey, Deshaun's not throwing the ball. Again, go back and watch the all-22 on it. The number of underthrows, the number of just receivers waiting and having time to call their mom, figure out what's for dinner, figure out if the family got into the stadium okay, is everybody doing well? Great, I'll put me on the phone with grandma. Oh, here comes the ball. That was happening over and over and over again. And you still were able to put up these numbers, in part because Nick Chubb is great and because they looked at it. Give Stefanski, who's under some pressure this year, some credit. The play calling, I thought, was perfect for the way the game was playing out.
And weather was a factor. Maybe we give Deshaun a little bit of a pass on that, but it wasn't just it wasn't just physical. It was, you're so late on some of these reads. But I'm not trying to sit here and trash the Browns either. This was a heck of a win for them. We all just kind of gave the Bengals a division, right? Or we said maybe the Ravens, who look good today too. But the Browns are a factor. The Browns have a lot of talent on this roster, and I'm interested to see them going forward with this defense.
And You're 1,000% right. I want to give all the credit in the world to Cleveland for a big win, right? This is important. This was an important win for them. And I'm also looking squarely at the Bengals and saying, hey, we've spent so much time talking about Joe Burrow's contract and what it means for them. And we're just presuming, but this is a year where the Bengals need to maximize what they have, especially when you look at what their salary cap's going to become and you look at the expectations that are now heaped on. Like, some of the things we've said about the Lions over the course of the last couple of months, how will they deal with the expectations? I think are reasonable to say about the Bengals moving forward. How would they deal with the expectations? Because in this year's AFC, like, we just watched Miami and the Chargers look great, right? We've seen the Chiefs without virtually anything, go out and at least play competently, right? We believe they'll be fine. We will see the Bills in action. We saw the Bengals, and it was not impressive at all. Like, they got to fix that now.
And again, we don't think that the Cincinnati Bengals are missing the playoffs, but good quality teams in the AFC are going to miss the playoffs. Maybe it is the Bengals. We don't know. I will say they are a slow starting team. They have started a lot of these seasons with Burrow slowly. They've gotten it going. I assume they will. There's too much talent for them to be bad, but they did look bad.
Yeah, I'm not stupid enough, contrary to popular belief, to bet against the Bengals. They're going to put it together. It'll be fine. I think this is one of those games that by week 10, we'll look back at week 1 and say, what did this mean for the Browns and the Bengals? There are some times that you step back and say, where does it go? Now, again, we are going to get to quite literally every game over the course of the show. And really remarkably, the fact that I didn't get fired. We'll tell that story. Plus, Frank and I had one massive disagreement coming into the season. Not only did he look right in Sunday's action, but I'm going to blame a superstar head coach for costing his team a game. We're going to do that coming up next. All right, it's Sunday Night Blitz. Frank Schwab, Jason Fitz, and I'm going to be honest, we'll get to a coach that cost his team a game. Very clearly cost his team a game. But I'm just kind of amazed that you have a co-host right now. I'm just going to be honest. I don't know if we've mentioned this in the show, but we were at the Yahoo Sportsbook at the Venetian Resort, Las Vegas.
Yeah.
And this is really my first, for everyone that's not aware, this is my first real week of doing shows with Yahoo, right? So it's our first time being in person, getting to do a show. It's exciting. It's great. But I think y'all played with fire a little bit, asking me to be in public while my beloved Raiders were playing. I'm just impressed, my friend, that I didn't get, there were a couple of not family-friendly words that went out of my mouth, but I didn't get fired. I didn't get fired. A couple F-bombs went out that were a little too loud in front of our bosses that were 3 feet from me. But overall, a great experience, by the way. The little snacks were amazing. The drinks weren't
great. Here at the Yahoo Sportsbook at the Venetian Resort, Las Vegas. I was surprised you even had any thoughts about Chargers Dolphins, because I just thought you watched that Raiders game like it was the Super Bowl.
Look, that's every Sunday.
Yeah, I was surprised, man.
Look, what did we win? 4 or 5 wins a year. So they all feel like the Super Bowl to me. But I won some money on it too. I'm not gonna, as everybody knows, I was really aggressive. I thought the Raiders would beat the Broncos. But I'll be honest, I was so wrapped up in the game, I even forgot that I had money on it. So that's why I try not to bet on the Raiders. We'll get to the Raiders in a minute, because I know you're just clamoring for the hot takes that I have.
By the way, the best experience on an NFL Sunday is in a Vegas sportsbook, right?
Oh, yeah.
I'd rather do that than go to a stadium. I'd rather do that than go to my favorite sports bar. That energy in the sportsbook when the games are just like that Dolphins-Chargers game, people are going crazy. It is so much fun. It was great. And this sportsbook, I know we've been funny about being company men. It's a great sportsbook. And I'm a sportsbook connoisseur, okay? So I can say that. This is one of the top ones out there. Fun day in the book on a Sunday.
And you're right. It's totally right, because there are so many fans from all over. It was cool to see Giants jerseys and Dolphins jerseys, and everybody was here, and they all have money on the game, so people are yelling and screaming. It's electric. There's nothing like it. Hopefully we get to do it a bunch, because I had a blast hanging out with you. Now, one team that you and I both were yelling at throughout the course of the game was the Titans. And I cannot believe that we're actually sitting here focused on Tennessee, New Orleans, because let's face it, not a lot of people were doing cartwheels in the streets for the breakdown of the Titans Saints game, but you should be, because this game had an important outcome. This was a 1-point win for New Orleans. And that becomes particularly significant because late in the game on this, a 16-15 win for the Saints, late in the game, it was a 4th and, I think, 6, deep in territory, in scoring territory for the Titans. And Mike Vrabel, with a couple minutes left, decided that in that moment, instead of going for it, he would kick a field goal. That then gave the ball back to the Saints, and the Titans never saw the ball again. You and I were just
dumbfounded.
I still don't. It doesn't.
I don't get it. Like, and people have tried to explain this away. Oh, he wanted to trust his defense, or I think that's what Mike said after the game. Well, that's ridiculous. If you trust your defense, go for it on 4th down and expect him to get a stop. Then it was 4th and 12, and you're like, okay, that's tough. Or 3rd and 12. I'm sorry, 3rd and 12. Tough ask to go if it's 4th and 12, but they pick up 6 yards. Oh, now it's 4th and 6 at the 11-yard line. Like this, I didn't even think. It didn't even cross my mind that they might kick a field goal. And I look back at the score, and it was 16-50. I'm like, what? It took me a minute to process. Like, what did they take a holding penalty and get knocked back 10 yards? Because there's no excuse for him not going for it there. And he's a great coach. But I think Mike Vrabel is top 5-ish coach in the NFL, right? Like, I mean, if you start doing the breakdown, like there's a lot of good coaches that may be whatever. Mike Vrabel's up there. He's great. And he had an awful decision that absolutely cost him this game. Like at least a chance to win the game. You don't know. I mean, Ryan Tannehill was terrible today. Maybe he doesn't pick up those 6 yards. But he didn't even give his team a chance right there. I can't even imagine like what the thought process was in kicking a field goal there.
And you and I disagreed coming into the season about the Titans. I think they're much closer to being at the top of their division than at the bottom. And I looked at this game and I thought, this is the sort of game you got to win if I'm going to be right and you're going to be wrong, right? Shout out to my buddy Buck Rising that works in Nashville and was in the scrum afterwards. I asked him immediately. I sent him a text and I was like, dude, what did Vrabel have to say? And Buck immediately came back and said, well, I trust my defense. You make such a great point, though. If you go for it on 4th down, that deep in territory, and you don't get it, you're now telling the Saints, better drive the length of the field. Like, you're going to win.
Defense and going for it on 4th down. Like, that's such an empty platitude for him to spout at that point. No, you need to explain that decision because it was terrible, Mike.
And that's one of the hard parts sometimes, I think, with Mike in the way that he approaches these things, because Vrabel is so beloved by so many, and he's considered by so many to be very good at what he does and one of the best and elite, and the reason we pay attention to the Titans. All of these things, rightfully so, are said about Mike Vrabel. The problem is when you question him on things like this, it just seems like he blows you off like you don't know what the hell you're talking about. I think this was a mistake. I think they were in a game that, frankly, Ryan Tannehill didn't play all that great. They weren't getting a lot done offensively. When you're not getting a lot of production offensively and you're that deep, you got to find a way to take advantage of it, right? So they lose a game that they could have won against the Saints, and those are the sorts of things that will come back to haunt them later in the season.
Absolutely. And another thing with Vrabel here, and this, Tajay Spears outsnapped Derrick Henry today. It wasn't a negative game script game for the Titans. They were never down by more than a score, I'm pretty sure. They had 19 runs by running backs in this game, 34 throws by Ryan Tannehill, who was bad. What are you doing? You got Derrick Henry. Like, he is first ballot Hall of Famer, and you're giving Tajay Spears in his first NFL game more snaps? In a game that was, again, if they were down 21 and, okay, we just need Spears out there, 3rd down stuff, whatever. Okay, but this wasn't that game. This is a game that Derrick Henry could have taken this game over, and he's not out there for his full I don't know if he's hurt or not. I haven't heard anything that way. I just think Mike Vrabel had a really, really bad day at the office. For a great coach you said it, and I agree, he cost them this game.
I think also, real quick here, Derek Carr gets a win, and the Saints get a win in bonus time because Alvin Kamara is suspended currently, as we know. When you get a win without Alvin Kamara in that situation, you just got an extra.
You know, as a good player we didn't talk enough about this offseason, that's Rashid Shaheed.
Oh,
Their second-year receiver made big play after big play, and you can tell. Look, this Saints team, we'll have time to talk about them this season, I know. Michael Thomas is healthy. Olave's a stud. Shaheed's good. They're going to get Kamara back. The Saints team might be pretty good down the road.
The Saints team might be pretty good. This Bears team might be pretty bad. Green Bay, Chicago, as we all know, Aaron Rodgers owns Chicago. I hated the NFL schedule when it came out because I felt like the NFL was putting a ton of pressure on Jordan Love out of the gates to continue to own Chicago. And all Jordan Love did was decide that he's essentially a real estate agent, and he just took it over. Like, the Bears got their asses kicked. There's no nice way to say it. Jordan Love missed some throws and still looked really good. And if I'm a Chicago fan right now, I'm looking around, I'm like, I love Justin Fields coming out of college, but I think it's fair looking. He had some throws in this game that you just didn't make any sense. And all of a sudden, you're looking around thinking, y'all had $90 million in salary cap money. The hell did you spend it? You just, how does this happen when you have all that money and you're supposed to have all this hope? Like, if I'm a Bears fan today, right now, I'm apoplectic.
Yeah,
I just wanted to use a big word.
That was pretty big. What does that mean? Gotta look it up real quick.
You're freaking out.
You are right. I mean, you said this. We shot a video before, and you said, it's not going to happen now for the Bears. When's it going to happen? Because Aaron Rodgers isn't part of your life anymore. He's out in New York, and you got this Jordan Love who nobody wanted to give any credit to throughout the offseason. Look, I was wrong about a lot of stuff, right? I think I was right about the Packers. I said all offseason, the one team we're sleeping on is the Green Bay Packers. They have a bigger upside than anybody wants to admit. My number one win total play this year was the Packers over 7.5. My number two win total play was the Bears under 7.5. How did these two teams have the same exact win total? How are the Packers underdogs in this game? We're going to look back at that line and be like, what the heck was Vegas thinking at the Yahoo Sportsbook at the Venetian Resort, Las Vegas? It made no sense at all that the Packers were underdogs in this game, and it showed it. I think the Packers are good. I think Jordan Love's going to be good too.
How did the Packers do that in a game where they only averaged just under 3 yards a carry, too? Like, that's because I think Matt LaFleur, go back to Matt LaFleur's offense when he was the offensive coordinator with the Titans. Wants to run the ball, establish the run, then have a mobile quarterback and get some things done. I thought this was Matt LaFleur's offense. They didn't run the ball particularly well, and Jordan Love still played well. So, I mean, kudos to the Packers, kudos to the organization, kudos to Jordan Love.
They had him ready. They had him ready. And I'll point to one key pivotal moment in this game. The Bears cut the lead to 24-14, and you're like, uh-oh, this could be a game in the fourth quarter. Jordan Love takes the ball right downfield and scores a touchdown. That was a huge moment, not just for the Packers in this game, but for Jordan Love and his development, because that is when you need your quarterback to show up. This game's in peril. All right, we're going to step on their throat right now. Jordan Love did that.
So now we move to what was obviously the biggest game of the century, maybe the biggest game of a lifetime, perhaps the single greatest football game ever played. Okay, fine. My beloved Raiders take on the Broncos. They open the season in Denver. Obviously going to be a difficult matchup for them, but a game that I was confident in coming in. The Raiders get the 17-16 dramatic win in a game where, frankly, I don't think either team was great. I don't think either team played particularly clean. I thought there were stupid penalties by both sides of the ball. The one thing I will say, though, is last year, very clearly, I lived through the single most difficult year I've ever lived through as a fan. I watched the Raiders blow a historic number of double-digit leads in the fourth quarter. I've never seen anything like what I saw last year. I've never seen a team find weird ways to lose over and over and over again. And this time, for one Sunday at least, Jimmy G played well enough when he needed to play well enough.
He always does, doesn't he? He's got that record, right?
He got it done. The Raiders get the ball. They got to run out the clock, and they do with some great plays by Jimmy G. The Raiders found a way to win the type of game that they have lost for the last several years. A lot of credit to Sean Payton. A lot of credit to Russell Wilson. I thought they did a great job. You mentioned earlier, like, find the matchups. Sean Payton was absolutely doing that, crushing some of the secondary members of the Raiders. It was an efficient game for Russell Wilson, but the Raiders find a way with Max Crosby playing well and with Jimmy G doing just enough. They get a big win.
Yeah, and I mean, I'll push back on the Russell Wilson thing because I actually didn't think he played well. I think his stats look good. He was way too safe. It was too much of Sean Payton just saying, you're going to be a game manager. That ain't what they're paying him for. That ain't what they traded it for. Like, you are not going to win many games with Russell Wilson averaging, I think, 5.6 yards per completion. It was something like that. I might be wrong a little bit in the stat there. But he was just too safe. He wasn't getting anything going downfield. And the one time they needed something out of Russell Wilson, they get the ball back right after Jimmy G. They took the lead. I can't remember who scored that touchdown. It's 17-16. All right, Russ, you got the ball. And they go 3 and out. And it was 3rd and 11, and he throws short of the sticks to Adam Troutman, who gets tackled. Like, you need more out of Russell Wilson than he showed today.
So an old Nick Saban-ism that I learned from A.J. McCarron when we were working together one time is that Nick preaches, take what the defense gives you, and eventually they'll give you the game. That's a Sabanism. And I was watching that, to your point, thinking it's exactly what Russ was doing. The Raiders, I think, were a little scared of their secondary, so they were playing really far off, and Russ was happy to take that yardage. I mean, you're right, 17-16. Of all the games we saw today, it was not the prettiest, but it was pretty for me, only because...
It was very pretty for you. You'll frame that one.
Yeah, there was a large F-bomb at the end of that. All right, let's move to one game that actually was surprisingly interesting because I think everybody was out on the Colts coming in. Everybody's in on the Jags. Feels like they're a darling. Jacksonville taking on Indianapolis. Anthony Richardson, better than most people expected in game one. And the Jags really had their hands full for the entirety of this football game.
It really looked like Indianapolis was going to win this. And I know the numbers weren't great for Anthony Richardson, but they were good. And I thought he was one of those players in week one where you're like, he doesn't look raw to me. He looks ready for the NFL. He's obviously huge. He can run. We're going to get that. We knew we were going to get that out of him. I thought he passed it really well today. I thought Anthony Richardson showed out. He got hurt at the end. I hope that's not serious at all. Doesn't seem to be anyway. But I just thought that he was in control most of the game. You wouldn't have guessed, here's the most raw rookie quarterback in the NFL right now. You say, no, he belongs. And I thought that was a big part of this. Jaguars get the win. Calvin Ridley's going to the moon this year. Trevor Lawrence is going to be awesome all year. But I thought the key takeaway was Anthony Richardson. A, he's ready for prime time. B, he needs some help. Like, I think Deion Jackson had 14 yards on 13 carries. They missed Jonathan Taylor today. They need to get him back. And I guess he will be week 5. Anthony Richardson needs that for his development. He can't have the whole offense on his shoulders. But very good debut for him.
I think Anthony Richardson went to the absolute perfect place, and we saw why today. Shane Steichen is so good at what he does. And we saw that as when he was the offensive coordinator in Philly, right? He did a great job of finding a way to accentuate what Jalen Hurts does well. From the outset of this, Anthony Richardson felt like he was comfortable, right? And
it really did, yeah.
That
great
to me
call.
was
Great call by you.
pretty stunning. 24-37 too. Throwing the ball 37 times was a surprise to me. But they did
because they don't have Jonathan Taylor. Like that again, you need that. That's why they couldn't napalm this whole scenario with Jonathan Taylor, and Irsay did anyway, because you need Jonathan Taylor. You can't have Anthony Richardson throwing 35 times a game, or 37 times a game. That's not a formula.
This was a 31-21 win, a 10-point win, but the Jags scored 14 points in the fourth quarter to none. So it was a big win for them. You mentioned Calvin Ridley. I will give him another shout out. Calvin Ridley was out of the league for a year, right? And nobody was paying attention. And while nobody was paying attention, my guy was in the gym getting ready for it. You could see coming into this game, like ETN played well, Trevor Lawrence played well, Calvin Ridley played well. I think the Jags are going to be just fine, but I'll also give the Colts some credit for being much pluckier than we thought, which brings me to another team that I have to give some credit. Like, I don't know the best way to prepare Crow, but I might have to eat a little bit of it on the Patriots, because how I've been loudly screaming Mac Jones is no good, and I don't think that the Patriots are going to be any better than 4th in their division. They took it all the way through in this thing. Like, Philadelphia was the big favorite in this game by most people, right? Like, there was an expectation that even with 2 new coordinators, the Eagles would be just fine. They were not just fine. They get a 5-point win that came down to the wire, a out-of-bounds pass at the very end that could have kept it alive. Like, kudos to Mac Jones. Started off slow, righted this thing. I was really impressed with the Patriots.
I was too. They all played them today. They all played the Eagles, period. But Patriots put themselves in such a hole early on, 16-zip. They get the weird pick 6. Darius Slay takes it a house. Zeke fumbles. That leads to directly to a touchdown. And we were both like, oh, my goodness. So the Patriots are going to get run out. And the Patriots played really well for the last 3 quarters. And they probably deserved to win this game. They're going to look back on this as we should have won that game. They outgained them. They played pretty well. I thought Mac was fine. Look, Bill Belichick team is never going to be bad. It's just they're going to be this team that's a pain in everybody's behind all year. They're not an easy out. They were not an easy out to the Eagles today. I thought they did a lot of things very well to keep Jalen Hurts contained. The Eagles did not look great today, but I think a lot of that's the Patriots. I think the Patriots are going to be what the Patriots are now in the post-Brady world, where they play well enough to win a lot of times. They're never going to roll over and just get their asses handed to them. Like, it's going to be a pretty good team all season. That's probably going to end up winning 7 or 8 games because they just don't have the blue chip talent to get to 10, 11 wins.
Being down 16 is a big part of why this, but I'm still stunned that Mac Jones threw the ball 54 times, right? Like,
we have a lot. We're talking about that a lot, aren't we? These teams where we're just like these. I get it's a pass-heavy league, but
it feels like it was week 1 for coordinators too, because the play calling was just, like sometimes it's hard not to give in to the temptation. Another team that we're trying to figure out after 1 week what to make sense of, the Rams versus the Seahawks. Like, I heard people last week telling me that the Seahawks were supposed to be they could actually win the West.
I was one of those people. Yeah, you could just call me out. It's fine. You don't got to subtweet me. That's all right. That's all right.
But here's the thing. Like, the Rams' young receivers showed up. Geno Smith didn't. And that's where you end up. You end up with the Rams getting, I think, a pretty stunning win for most of us.
I was stunned. I thought, man, the Seahawks are going to roll them. Like, how can the Rams compete without Cooper Kupp? And I thought Matthew Stafford was awesome in this game. Like, just one of the best games of his career, honestly, because he was just out there with a skeleton crew. And he's making these rookies look good. It was really, really kind of cool to see Stafford. Like, Stafford's got to be like, I've won my ring and I'm coming back to what now? We're kind of rebuilding. We're kind of not. But he went out, played out of his mind today. I really was impressed with Stafford's toughness, kind of carrying these young teammates who maybe he doesn't talk to a lot because they're always on their phones, right? But He carried these young teammates to a win. They look good. Like, I don't know that they can keep this going. This might be the week 1 result that we look back on in November. And how the heck did the Rams blow out the Seahawks? Maybe the Seahawks are a little fugazi. I don't know. Like, I was high on them coming into the season. Geno's going to just pick up where he left off. They added JSN to the offense, Zach Charbonnet. They look terrible. They were. I didn't even see them with the ball in the second half. Every time I looked up at that game, Matthew Stafford's handing it to Kyron or completing a pass to Puka Akuna. Or I'm still learning his name, right? Like, he was awesome today, but the Seahawks never even had the ball. Like, the offense got nothing going. It was a bad outing for Seattle.
Seattle loses both their tackles in the game. I think it's fair to say, hey, offensive line play a big part of that. But to your point, we've been measured and consistent on saying, hey, if you were a one-year wonder at quarterback, I want to see it again. Brock Purdy was one example of that. We've been asking questions about Kenny Pickett. Fair to say, hey, Geno had a year most people didn't expect last year. Now the questions are going to start, hey, is this a problem or was this just 1 week? So kudos to Sean McVay, though, getting that done.
Yeah,
and getting
you forget like how much coaching in the NFL matters. Like, he had him ready.
So one of the coaches we were really excited to see this year, obviously, Todd Monken taking over as offensive coordinator for Baltimore. Houston comes in, a team with very low expectations. They're going into Baltimore to take on this offense. It's supposed to look great. It looked. I mean, it's still a work in progress, right? I mean, the Ravens get the win, but it wasn't the dominant, oh my God, performance I think a lot of us expected from Baltimore.
Yeah, this was kind of the one game on the slate that I don't take anything out of, just because the Texans are still bad. They should not have traded their first-round pick next year. Baltimore's kind of good, I guess, but they didn't need to show everything in this game. I thought Zay Flowers played really well. The J.K. Dobbins injury, he's out for the year with an Achilles. That's huge for them. I don't really know what they do. I assume anyway, don't you, that they're on the phone with Leonard Fournette and Kareem Hunt's agents tomorrow saying, hey, okay, let's talk, because I don't think they could just go ahead with Gus Edwards and Justice Hill the rest of the season. I think they're going to need to add a good veteran, not just depth. They're going to need to add a bell cow to this offense.
I know that we all expect that Todd Monken's going to come in and modernize the offense. And Lamar still adjusting to that. I thought he threw the ball pretty well today, but it wasn't necessarily a 17-22, 169. No touchdowns, one pick in that new offense.
Fine.
But
good enough to beat
fine.
the Texans.
Right. I think it's still work in progress. They're one of those teams that's going to need another month or so. Hill, by the way, had 7 carries, 9 yards, 2 touchdowns, but only one carry prior to the Dobbins injury. So to your point, I don't know what we're going to see out of the running back position, but they're going to have to bring somebody in off the street. And it should also be noted, Zay, only wide receiver that even got more than 3 targets. So they're going to spread the ball around, especially when they were without Mark Andrews. I thought they were going to spread the ball more to the wide receivers. They didn't do that. So I guess it's a win for them, but it's not a big win.
It's fine. We got it done. Whatever. Let's move on to week 2.
Tampa Bay, Minnesota. It's a game that the Vikings, I mean, we asked who the Vikings are going to be this year. Doesn't look like the Vikings started off looking like they're going to be very good, right? Like this is, I don't know, a surprising outcome, but if you're the Vikings, you're probably a little frustrated that a Tampa Bay team, that doesn't necessarily have an answer quarterback did for 1 week.
I hate talking like this, but Baker didn't play well, but he made winning plays, right? Like, I mean, it's always such a weird concept, but I thought that when Baker Mayfield needed to make the plays he did, and I hate to do this because I'm a Kirk Cousins defender, right? I always think he gets a bad rap, but this is kind of the quintessential Kirk Cousins game. Throws for 344. They move the ball up and down the field, but when he needed to make the play, he didn't. Turns it over 3 times. And you're left scratching your head like, how did Kirk Cousins throw for this many yards? Baker Mayfield didn't make a ton of plays. How did they lose? And it's because they were -3 in turnover margin. I get it, but this is like the Kirk Cousins critics game where they can just point to this and say, that's Kirk Cousins. Puts up a lot of numbers. Can't win the game for you. Or Baker Mayfield. I thought this is a huge season for Todd Bowles and Baker Mayfield, right? Todd Bowles on the hot seat. Baker Mayfield's never getting another shot to start if he doesn't get it done this year. This is a great start for them on that path. I mean, to get this win in Minnesota, hey, whatever we think about Minnesota, they were a playoff team last year. And they got it. They went in and got it done.
I do have to ask, when's the last time you saw a stat line like this rushing the football? This is Tampa Bay in a winning effort. 33 carries for 73 yards, a 2.2 yard per carry average. That's not a misspeak by me for once.
Their longest run was 6 yards today.
Longest run was 6 yards. But they stayed committed to it, right? They're like, hey, we're just going to grind this thing down. And And they did? I don't even know what to make of that.
It was one of those games where literally I was like, how is Tampa Bay winning this game? What is going on right now that Minnesota can't get over the hump? And they just couldn't.
Yeah, and in Minnesota, now, all of a sudden, we look at that division and say, okay, the Lions get a huge win on Thursday night, right? The Packers get a huge win on Sunday. So we've been asking who's going to stand out in that division. At least for 1 week, we got the answer that there are two teams in there that look like they could be very good and two teams that need to figure things out.
Yeah, Vikings are very much on alert right now. That's a bad loss for them. It's a bad loss for them.
A good win for Atlanta, maybe. Carolina taking on Atlanta. Desmond Ridder is really the question. And I think it's fair right out of the gate to say, I think that there's talent on the Falcons roster. I don't trust Desmond Ridder. And I didn't see anything in one game that changed my opinion on that. Like you mentioned it as we're watching the game. It felt like anything farther than, I don't know, a yard and a half downfield. And they were like, nope, don't throw that. Like, it was a weird passing attack.
For a team that all offseason tried to tell us, we don't need Lamar Jackson. We have full trust in Desmond Ridder. He's a star. I hid their quarterback the whole game, really. Like, I maybe just didn't feel like they needed much because they were going to beat the Panthers anyway with a rookie quarterback starting. By the way, the number one overall pick at quarterback starting in week 1 has now lost 9 in a row. Do you know the last number one overall pick to win in week 1?
Andrew Luck? That's just a guess.
No. They're David Carr.
Oh, David Carr. The other Carr.
2002 was the last time a number one overall pick at quarterback started week 1 and his team won the game. Bryce Young didn't play well in this game. Like, they didn't get anything, didn't have a pass longer than 14 yards. He's going to be a good player, but it's going to take some time. Look, I'll give the Falcons credit. Like, as much as I think Arthur Smith is crazy sometimes for absolutely positively refusing to get his best players the ball. We saw Bijan Robinson playing behind Algier a lot. Drake London didn't even catch a pass. Kyle Pitts was kind of like he just has this weird thing where he tries to make the NFL harder than it should be by never getting his best players the ball. But it worked. I mean, they won 24-10. This game was never really in doubt. The Falcons are going to be a pretty feisty team this year probably. But the thing that'll hold them back is if this is Desmond Ridder and they got to win with, in spite of him, basically, how far can they go?
And this is why you can't just rely on the box score for anything. Because somebody right now is looking at 15-18 for 115 and a quarterback rating of 111.8. And they're like, why are you guys being so tough?
He didn't lose a game for him, at least. But he didn't. It was just kind of a,
But how do we live in a world where I'm talking about targets here? Drake London had one target. Like, one time you're like, yeah, we should throw the ball to him. Like, I mean, Kyle Pitts had 3 targets in the whole game. Like, what's the point? Like, the next time the Falcons draft somebody that's good on the offensive side of the ball, I'm just going to say, what the hell's the point?
I was looking at their first drive, and I'm like, why is Algier running the ball all the time here? You just drafted Bijan Robinson 8th overall, and you're giving Tyler Algier. Tyler Algier's a good player. That probably means you shouldn't have drafted Bijan Robinson 8th overall. Like,
no, I've got good news. I've got good news for Bijan, though. He led the team in targets and receptions at 6. So maybe he can have the Players Association and decide that he's
we're like, whoa, did you see that touchdown? He's going to be great. Sometimes I don't get Arthur.
He's just going to ask the league to reclassify him as a wide receiver so he can actually get paid at his next contract. I'm just saying, all right. And of course, that brings us to the only game we haven't previewed yet. And I want to give this game just a little bit of special sauce.
Okay.
Because
you're going to have to.
Yeah, well, I'm putting a lipstick on a pig here. I came into this season saying that if Sam Howell could play well, I believe that the Washington Commanders have a playoff caliber roster. I believe that they could be a playoff team. And what I learned in a win over Arizona is that is a huge if, because it didn't look good. And the Cardinals, like, if we're being blunt, it looked like the Cardinals cared a lot more about that game from the outset. Like, it felt like Washington still thought that, I don't know, it was preseason or something.
Yeah, it was very underwhelming. Of all the week 1 teams that won, I was most disappointed in Washington. Felt like a loss for them almost. As somebody who had all of his survivor pool picks on Washington, I was sitting there in the second half like, I'm going to get knocked out by the Arizona Cardinals winning this game. What is going on? Like, they just had there's nothing good in this game by Washington. Their defense was okay, I guess, but you're playing Joshua Dobbs. Your offense, like you said, Sam Howell is decent, I guess, and McLaurin didn't do anything, and Antonio Gibson didn't do anything. I just came away from this game saying, I was with you. I thought Washington was going to be a pretty good team this year. Right now, I'm like, maybe they're not. This was it was so underwhelming, but we'll see. Maybe they're just playing down to the competition. It was just a bad performance by them in a win.
I mean, Brian Robinson, okay. Jahan Dotson, okay. Terry McLaurin, okay. There was this moment where I'm reading off those names because those are capable players. Like, those are very good players. And defensively, they had 11 tackles for loss in this game. Think about that. That's a high number of tackles for loss. They had 11 times they stopped Arizona behind the line of scrimmage. And they still needed every ounce of everything they could get to eke out a 20-16 win. Like,
unbelievable. It didn't feel like they deserved to win. Like, it felt like Arizona was actually the better team for most of this game, as crazy as that sounds.
And here's the variable we need to remember. This is no longer Dan Snyder's football team, which means every single person in that building, including Ron Rivera, who has obviously lived through a lot as the head coach of this organization, is now having to prove to new ownership that they deserve to be in the building. That is a big deserve to be that is going to be based on competitiveness this year, right? Like, so Howell's got to play better. They've got to play with more pace. It was a slow, ugly, calculated win. And it was just like, all right, guys, let's get out of here. And maybe that's why I feel like it felt like a preseason game, because it had such a tone of let's just get out of here without any injuries. That's what it felt like they were going for.
It was ugly. It was just an ugly win.
All right, so let's take a look at Monday Night Football. Obviously, that's the only game left on the slate. We have the Bills taking on the Jets. We've seen so much chaos. My question for you, did you see anything today that is such an overwhelming theme that it carries over to tomorrow?
Not really. I thought scoring was kind of down, hard to come by. Maybe we're going to see a defensive game because for all the talk about Aaron Rodgers, his debut, Josh Allen, these are two really good defenses. To me, this was the best matchup of week one because I still don't know what to make of it. We're sitting here at the Yahoo Sportsbook at the Venetian Resort Las Vegas. I can go bet on this game, and I have no idea which side I would bet on. I have no idea. I think this is an awesome matchup that way. Really looking forward to see. Look, if the Jets are going to be taken seriously this year, you got to come. Maybe you don't have to win, but you got to come out and play the Buffalo Bills tough. This can't be we lost 21-10 and we never look good game. The Jets got to come out and make a statement here. Even if it's not a win, you got to compete with the Buffalo Bills in this game.
There was one thing that hit me a lot today, and it's that offensive lines don't feel like they're up to speed yet. And I'll go back to my longtime friend, Mike Golick Jr. I asked him one day to explain why offensive line play can look so good and so bad with the same groups of people. And the way he described it, and I'll never forget, is if you ask 5 people to lock arms and they walk at you in absolute symmetry and they're coming at you at the exact same pace in the exact same way, that is almost impossible to get through. If any one of them is even half a step back or half a step forward, all of a sudden now you can penetrate, right? And so his whole point was like lockstep matters for offensive line. Everything about the way they move and when they move and how they move matters. What did we see in the Giants game? They didn't have that lockstep. The Jets have one key weakness. That's their offensive line. I think you're right. Both of these defenses are great. But if I'm looking at today's action and I'm looking at the way the Bengals played, and the Bengals have invested a ton of money, but their line wasn't good enough here. Like the Giants, their line wasn't good enough.
And they've invested the picks, yeah.
So you start to sit here and say, okay, the one sort of ugly thing about the Jets nobody wants to talk about are the big fat guys. Are the big fat guys going to be good enough? Today's action only makes me more confident that I think Buffalo can come out and make a statement.
Really, you take Buffalo. You like Buffalo tomorrow? Okay.
Yeah, I think I'm going to walk out of here and then just go to the sports book and just
the Yahoo Sportsbook,
the Yahoo Sportsbook at the Venetian Resort in Las Vegas, and just take a little bit of those winnings and put them back down on Buffalo.
I feel good to see about that. But this is a great game, one way or another. This is a tone setter type of game. Again, I think for the Jets more than the Bills. The Jets got to come out and say, "Hey, we got Aaron Rodgers. We're legit." Okay, all right. Let's figure it out on Monday night.
I also want to give the league some credit because I've spent so much of my career and now even with Yahoo, so much of my time covering college football. It's something I love covering. I have been so disappointed week in and week out with the fact that college football over the course of the first few weeks has been sparse in marquee matchups, right? Like at the time of year when we want it the most, what did we get today? Over and over, whether the games were all great or not, we had close outcomes across the board for many of the games, which I think is good for the sport. But we also had, whether it's rivalries, for me as a Raiders fan, to open against the Broncos has meaning, right? For Cincinnati fans, to open against Cleveland has meaning. They put games up week one that have meaning to the fan bases. I think that's such a smart move because we sat today in a sports book filled with people that were absolutely obsessed with the result, not just because of the money, not just because of fantasy, not just because of gambling, but also because the rivalry that they chose to put into week one, I think it hits different. So I think the NFL has really mastered this thing.
Packers, Bears. I mean, even interconference with Lions, Chiefs was a perfect matchup, as it turned out. Great week one. Great. I love week one. Something is always weird in week one, something I didn't see coming. There was a million things I didn't see coming in this week one. It was great. Yeah, I agree with you. The NFL did a great job scheduling this thing. We're off to a great start, man.
My only hope is that Yahoo's just going to bring us back out here every week because I like hanging out with you while we watch the games.
We can just stay. Yeah.
Oh, wait, the Raiders play the Bills next week? I probably should. That one I should definitely be in my own house for. There's no doubt that's going to be ugly. Okay, you guys can hang out with us, obviously, every single Sunday. You know what to do. Leave a 5-star review. Let us know what you think of the new show. If you didn't like it, don't leave the review. Fine. If you loved it, leave the 5-star review. Rate, subscribe, tell your friends, your families, enemies. Tell everybody to hang out with us every single Sunday. Charles McDonald back on Tuesday with the exempt list. You don't want to miss that. I'm back on Wednesday with Charles Robinson, Jory Epstein for inside coverage. Obviously, you can follow us on Twitter at Yahoo Schwab. You are a company man.
A company man here at the Yahoo Sports Book.
At Yahoo Schwab. You are a shill. I appreciate that. And you can follow me at Jason Fitz, at SJ Rochelle is our producer. That's Stone. We love Stone and everything that he does to help us put this show together. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with us. We will be back next Sunday. Come out, hang with us again. And I'm telling you right now, if the Raiders beat the Bills, I will be insufferable.
Yeah, I'm going to have to root for the Bills, right?
Oh, come on, son of a biscuit. That's why I can't have nice things. Thanks for hanging out with us, guys.